What's up, everybody? So this is part two of my two-part series centered around Thanksgiving. Part one was all about those of you that are trying to stay really strict on the holiday. You just want to keep everything even keel. You don't want to try to, you don't want to lose any progress. You don't want to lose any momentum. You just want to stay strict on your diet and come out of it completely unscathed. Today, part two, this is kind of for those of you that are wanting to kind of just let loose a little bit. You're wanting to enjoy the day a little bit more. You're wanting to have some foods that maybe you haven't had in a while. The bottom line for you is you just want to kind of enjoy the day and have a great Thanksgiving day. But at the same time, you don't necessarily want to completely put on 10 pounds for one meal. So coming up next, I'm going to give you my 5 tips for being able to enjoy Thanksgiving without completely blowing your diet. All right, everybody, so here's the deal. You've been dieting for, who knows, weeks, months, could be years. You've lost weight, you've had momentum, maybe you're at a point where you're actually maintaining, and here comes the holidays, and it usually freaks us all out because it's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to end up gaining 5 pounds, 10 pounds, or maybe that's going to be the one catalyst or the trigger that's going to make you get back on your old ways of eating, and before you know it, you're gaining your 5, 10, 20, 50, maybe 100 pounds later, and you wonder how, what happened. And so what I want to do today is I want to kind of talk to you a little bit about what I'm planning on doing, actually. I'm not planning on being horribly strict this Thanksgiving. I do want to enjoy the day a little bit, and so I'm going to give you some of the things that I'm going to be following. I've lost 75 pounds for those of you, or 77 now, for those of you that maybe are new to my channel or just kind of tuning in. And so my whole, my deal about today about Thanksgiving coming up is going to be just trying to focus on enjoying the day while not completely destroying everything. And so what I want to do is just kind of dive into some of the tips that I have. If you're interested in the strict version, you're like, hey, I don't want to gain anything, I don't want to lose any momentum, I'll put a link to that down in the description. But for today's video, I'm going to have 5 tips for you and maybe a bonus or two. Some of these are going to be kind of similar to the last video. I may have some things in there that sound similar, although there might be a few tweaks to them. So similar to the last video, tip number 1 is still plan ahead. Just like everything else, you do want to kind of have a plan in place. It's when we try to just go without thinking, or we just kind of want to dive in and just kind of see how it goes. That's when we can start getting in trouble, because before you know it, we're in a situation where we're not really thinking about things. We don't really have a plan in place, and we're just starting to grab food from here and grab food from here, and all of a sudden we're just, by the end of the day, we're sitting there feeling horrible, indigestion, and just, again, wondering how you just somehow managed to eat 10,000 calories in one meal. And so plan ahead. Have a plan for yourself. Know what you're going to do before you get to where you're going for dinner, even if it is at your own place, and know what you're going to do afterwards in the coming days. That's always kind of a good thing to do, because Thanksgiving is rarely just on that day, right? We're dealing with leftovers for what could be days afterwards. It helps to kind of know what you're going to do. Are you going to just kind of enjoy the one day and then go right back onto your dieting and strict dieting the following day, or are you going to enjoy maybe the weekend? For myself, I usually have a couple of days, and then one of the things that I try to do is I try to get back on being strict keto before a Monday. For me, all the years that I said, well, I'll start Monday, those things always trip me up and were always difficult to deal with. And so for me, I'm going to try my best to I'll have a couple of days where, I just enjoy some of the food that's there, some of the leftovers, and then I'm going to be right back on it. And so, but I know that going in, that's my plan. And so I would encourage all of you, have a plan set aside, put it together, and then do everything you can to stick with it. Tip number 2 is something that maybe you're not really familiar with, or maybe it could be something that you're already implementing into your plan, I guess, or your weight loss journey already, and that is consider intermittent fasting. I kind of stumbled on intermittent fasting by accident, and I'm going to have a whole nother video about intermittent fasting going on, but just for the sake of brevity, consider maybe getting up and just skipping a meal. Or if you're not going to skip a meal, maybe do what I mentioned in the last video and have, for those of you that maybe are new to the ketogenic diet or ketogenic lifestyle, there's things called like bulletproof coffee, which a real bulletproof coffee has butter and MCT oil and stuff in it. But for myself, I actually have like a chocolate MCT powder that I use, which kind of just gets me going, and it really is kind of satiating. It probably gives me 4 or 5 hours without really having to worry about it too much, depending on how I'm doing for the day. But if that's not for you, just consider intermittent fasting. Just kind of consider that, hey, you know what? I'm not going to eat up until I get to this meal. Now, I know it can be kind of a risk, but again, if you're kind of going into it thinking to yourself, I want to enjoy myself anyway, just skip any other early morning calories. And the other thing about it is that you get the added benefit of your stomach kind of shrinking a little bit, and it will you have a tendency to eat fewer calories when you do that. Even if you do go overboard and kind of stuff yourself a little bit, cumulatively, you're still likely to eat less calories throughout the day. And so consider intermittent fasting is tip number 2. For tip number 3, this is also going to kind of mirror a little bit from my other video, and that is to make substitutes that you don't really care too much about. So, you know, in my family, we have, you know, all the big staples, right? You have turkey and stuffing and mashed potatoes, and for me, mashed potatoes are just kind of like, you know, whatever, I can have them or I may not. I don't really care one way or the other. And so for me, that would be a really good opportunity to maybe, you know, substitute that out for a cauliflower mash or something like that. Because at the end of the day, I'm not going to feel like I'm missing out on anything. I'm just kind of like, hey, I'll throw this in there because, you know, I don't really care too much about it. And while I want to enjoy the day, I don't really care too much on this particular item, and so I'm just going to go ahead and substitute that. But for you, it may be something completely different. Think about the things that you really are not that high on your list that might just add empty calories that you're not really thinking about or they're not really caring about, and consider trying to bring or make a substitute for that item. It'll kind of help you still feel like you're conscientious of what you're doing, without making you necessarily add a bunch of extra calories that you just may not necessarily want or get any real pleasure, whether it's mentally or not, out of it. So consider making or bringing substitutes on items that you just don't really care about. Real quickly, before I get into tip number 4, I just want to take this opportunity to first off just say thank you for watching the video and hopping out on my channel. I am brand new onto YouTube, and so I really appreciate it. If you are new to my channel, that you might consider subscribing. I'd also love it if you could to maybe like the video, as well as drop a comment down in the comments section. You know, I always, I'm really looking forward to kind of engaging with everybody, kind of hearing what their tips are, how they get through the holidays, what their strategies are, and so I'd love for us to maybe be able to start a conversation there together. And so just a quick reminder, if you wouldn't mind, and when you do click on subscribe, maybe consider clicking on that bell icon. That way you you'll get notified anytime that I do put new content out. And so thank you for doing that. I really do appreciate it. And let's move on to tip number 4. So for tip number 4, I said it before, you know, we want to enjoy the things that we don't normally get to eat because, hey, it's just kind of that special day. But one of the things I will recommend is load up on the good foods, right? And so if you're going to have a huge plate and you're going to have all this stuff in here that you normally wouldn't have, consider loading up on like the proteins, load up on the vegetables, and that way you kind of have a little bit less room for some of the other foods that may not be quite as healthy or the things that may have a bigger impact on your plate. So for me, I might have a whole, you know, big thing of turkey over here, you know, trying to keep it with the proteins that are going on. And I might have some, you know, broccoli with you know, a good cheese sauce or something. I don't, you know, hey, let's do that, right? We're going to enjoy the day. We might as well have some fun with it. But I might put a lot of that on there. That way, really what's left on my plate is just a small portion. And as a side note, this is kind of a bonus tip, consider using maybe a smaller plate. Just the larger plate we have, the more we want to feel like we have to fill it up. And so use a smaller plate, load up on the good, you know, foods that you would probably normally eat if you were doing keto anyway. And see what happens at the end of the day. You'll probably find out that you're eating a whole lot less of those foods. Even though you get to enjoy them, you're not necessarily just loading up on them, and you're going to feel a whole lot better by the time you get to the end of the meal. Okay, so that brings us to tip number 5, and this is all centered around dessert, because if you're like most people, that's kind of what you're looking for, right? You go through the meal just to be able to get into dessert. And this is one where I would say, look, if you don't feel like you're missing out on something, bring a keto dessert. But if you're like, you know what, I really, look, forget keto stuff, forget the, you know, not artificial, but the, you know, the natural other sugar replacements and all that. I want some real dessert, all right? So if that's you, consider having somebody else that you trust, somebody that knows what's going on with your journey, have them serve you, you know, your dessert. Because I know for me, sometimes when I would go over, I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to get a small slice of pie. By the time I sit down, I've got either 5 different, you know, because we got 10 different pies that are there, and I've got slices from all of them, or my small slice of pie turns into a wedge that's about a quarter of the pie size. And so if that's kind of you, or that's been your habits in the past, consider having somebody that you trust. Maybe get in there, give you a small slice of something, or it's just a small piece of something, so that again, you're not necessarily tempted to dive in and get it all yourself and just kind of load up or overload. And it's good to have somebody that you trust, somebody that knows what you're doing and knows your journey, whether that's your spouse or significant other, or a family member that you know that's kind of seen what you're doing and seen your progress and really wants to do what they can to kind of help you along. And so, consider having them help you out during the great time of the meal, which is dessert time. Okay, so that kind of brings us to the end of the video, and I want to kind of end this video saying this. For some reason, we forget and lose sight of the fact that we are on a journey, right? This is it's the old cliche of this is not a sprint, this is a marathon. And this is one day, or maybe 1 or 2 days, or maybe a weekend, right? That's going on in our journey. And you know what? We're human, we're gonna make mistakes. Things are not always gonna go to plan. And so you know what? If at the end of the day, you throw all these tips out and you just go and absolutely gorge yourself, don't beat yourself up about it. Don't sit there and get so, swallowed up in guilt and shame and you start putting yourself down. And believe me, being someone that's been overweight for 20 years, I get that. I've done that to myself over and over again. It's just not worth it because, again, this is one day. This is one snapshot. And even if, in the worst case scenario, I put on a couple of pounds over this weekend, so what? At the end of the day, I know I'm highly capable of staying on my plan and getting rid of those pounds just about almost as quickly as I got them on. And you know what? I'm not going to sit there and beat myself up on it. So don't let your diet dictate your mood. Don't let your diet dictate how you feel about yourself. Just go in there with a plan that, hey, I'm going to enjoy the day today. And whatever it may be, it may be. And I'll do my best to mitigate the damage. But hey, you know what? I'm going to still enjoy myself. I'm going to enjoy time with my family. I'm going to enjoy time with loved ones. And at the end of the day, my diet is just that. It's my diet. It's one day in this very, very long journey. And so try not to get caught up in all that kind of stuff. Don't beat yourself up. Enjoy the day. Enjoy it without guilt. And then get back on the horse, whether that's on Saturday or Sunday or Monday, whatever works best for you. Just get back on it and know that, you know what, hey, I enjoyed this. And now I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to dive back into what I do because it's working for me and it's making me feel good. And at the end of the day, you get to actually have, you look back on Thanksgiving Day or those couple of days, that you've enjoyed them, you've eaten some foods that you want to eat, you've kind of enjoyed time around your family, and you know what, hey, it's time to get back on the horse and get down to business. So thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate your time. And as I said at the end of the other video, take this opportunity during this Thanksgiving. Be grateful for your loved ones. Be grateful for your family. Don't take them for granted. Enjoy the time together. Try to avoid all those lightning bolt topics. Let's just enjoy each other and time together. And at the end of the day, I really hope, from my family to yours, I wish you a very happy Thanksgiving. And I'll see you next time.